Okay, good morning. We are doing today Nun Amud Beis, and hopefully we'll be able to get onto Nun Aleph as well. So where we are today is that what we're discussing yesterday. Again, apologies for the way I sound, but I am feeling a little better. So the Gemara told us yesterday that we had a dispute between Rebbe and the Chachamim in relation to Yain Chai, right? If you had this raw wine that hadn't been diluted, which in those days was required in order to be able to utilize the wine. We had a machlekes between Rebbe and Chachamim. According to Rebbe, you were able to use that wine even for Netilas Yadayim. On that wine, you would make a ha'etz. Whereas the Chacham disagreed and said, no, you always make a hagefen on the wine, even though it's raw and hasn't been diluted, and you also can't use it for Netilas Yadayim. Then the Gemara said, the last one that we had yesterday was Kiman Azlah Damar Shmuel Isa Adam Kol Terachav Bepath. Who was this going according to this position of Shmuel, who says that you could do whatever you need to do with bread? The Gemara says, Kiman, who is this going like? Rabbi Lezer. In other words, Shmuel says that you could do whatever you need to do with bread. That's going according to the opinion of Rabbi Lezer, who says you could use wine for Netilas Yadayim. Meaning if the wine is not appropriate for drinking, because it's not diluted, that you could use it for other things. So too, you could use bread for other things, even if it's not the appropriate normative thing that you would use for bread, but you could do so. Who agrees with that? That's what we said yesterday. We have some time today. We're going to go a little bit more into that back. So I'm Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina. So now Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina says, Moed Chacham Rabbi Lezer. So Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina is saying that this machlokes that we had yesterday between the Chacham and Rabbi Lezer about whether or not on Yain Chai you're able to utilize it or not. So over here the Chacham agreed to Rabbi Lezer that what? Because shel bracha, in a situation because shel bracha, right? When do you have a kosher bracha? For example, by benching, you have a kosher bracha. I should just point out the interesting Rabbeinu Yonah. I don't know that halachically anyone goes like this. But nevertheless, interesting to mention, at least the custom they had, some people had in those days. In the Rabbeinu Yonah, it is on page Lamed Zayin of Beis and Daf Arif. Rabbeinu Yonah says that perish bracha to una kais when you're like making a benching, it needs a kais of wine. When you have a wine, you should make a berachas hamazon with wine. I feel hayachet shemavarich b'lei zimun tzarich sheyivarich b'kais. Even an individual person who's eating and benching alone should make a berachas hamazon on the kais. You don't make a bracha on wine until you put in water. Because their wines were very, very powerful. And you don't see the praise of the wine when you're drinking more wine like that. Until you have some healthy amount of water that would enable to be drunk normatively. Now, the point that we're saying, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina is saying that the Chachamim would normally say that you are able to make a hagefen on raw wine, but when it comes to kosher bracha, again, forget to be a about a single person making benching on wine. But when you're having a regular mezumim where somebody's using wine, so the Chacham would agree, says Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, that you do not make a bracha of hagefen on wine until you dilute it because you're using it for kosher bracha, not just drinking wine. In other words, when it comes just to drink plain wine, so then in the Chacham say you can make hagefen. But to use it for kosher bracha, they don't agree. Not raw wine. That's what B'Yisrael Yishita. Remember B'Yisrael but a Chacham was because bracha she'ein mevarach on love ad she'itil toichem ma'am. You cannot make a bracha, a kosher bracha, unless it has been already diluted by taima. What's the reason for this? Rabbi should be in a mitzvah min muvchar. You need a mitzvah min muvchar. It's a kosher bracha. It's not just drinking. You need to have something choice, something special. So therefore it has to be diluted wine. Rabbanan lemay chazi. What do the Rabbanan, what do they see this as being potentially used for? In other words, the Gemara seems to be saying that even though Rabbi Shebechina says what he says, the rabbis disagree in terms of what the Chacham actually held. You could use it even by a kaisel bracha. You could even use raw wine. So it must mean the Gemara is making an assumption that there is some usage for it. What is the usage for raw wine that's not diluted? Rabbanan l'may chazi, Amrab Zera, chazi l'kuryaiti. I have no idea what kuryaiti is, but it's some sort of a drink that I guess was enabling it to be used to some degree, and therefore since it's able to be used to some degree, it's not considered to be entirely undrinkable. Rashi tells us Kuryaiti is Paishin, and my last day Rashi tells us it's some sort of a medicine. Again, I'm not really sure, but the one other point to note is that this is not brought down by the Rambam, right? The Torah, it's not a halacha shulchan aruch like a bris Chanina. In other words, there's no caveat that you can only use diluted wine for kaishal bracha because you need mitzvah and muvcha. But the Rif brings it down. The Rif back there on Laman Zayin does bring that basic Rabbeinu as the halacha. That is to say, not that Rabbanon disagree, but say that even Yain Chai is chazi for something. It's chazi for kriyati. It's chazi for some sort of refuahs. And therefore, if it's chazi for something, you can make a bracha on it. Uh-huh. We had the discussion already on that. You do when you're making a bracha on it, if it's having a value aside from just medicinal. If it's just for medicinal, then not. But if you're having a value from it, in this case, the wine is a value. It also has however they mixed it, it also has medicinal value. But there is a side, a nutritional value from it that a person is gaining. Then you have the Rif. The way he brings it down is he brings it down that the Rabbi Yossi is in fact the halacha, and he thinks that the Chacham wouldn't agree that you could use Yain Chai to make a bracha on it for a kosher bracha. Okay, back to our Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. So the rabbis taught Dalad Devarim Nemru B'Path. There are 4 things that we say about bread. Now, in the Maseches Derech Eretz, we have a 5th thing also. So we'll just mention the 4, and then we'll mention the 5th. So what are the 4 things that we say about bread? You don't put raw meat on bread, right? To sort of soak up the meat, juice or whatever. Right? We don't say it's real blood because it's already had melicha, but whatever sort of juices are coming out of raw meat. So you don't soak out that by putting it on bread. You don't pass over full cups of wine over bread. You don't throw bread. You don't take your soup plate and stick it on, and use the bread as a placemat. These are not things that you do with bread. And the 5th thing that's brought down Seches Derech Eretz is Ein Yoshin, right? You don't sit down on the bread. Now, when we're saying this, just to be clear, this is not the same concept as what we're saying when on Shabbos we're going to cover the bread when we make Kiddush. It's not like from the same dinim, right? This is specifically here, dinim, in relation to either the bizyainus of the food, and you don't want it to be mivaza food, or it's a result of mios, that we don't want to make food disgusting. I think there's a bit of a difference between Rashi and Ben Yain over here. I'll show you the difference in a second. But on Shabbos, when we are saying that we cover the bread, and when we make Kiddush, not that it's a bizayin of bread. It's not a bizayin to bread in the sense of Shabbos that we're being mavaz the bread. The bread I made, the bread is still there. The bread is not being mavaz in that sense. The bizayin there is in kedimas, in terms of what you're using for a mitzvah or not using for a mitzvah first. But it's not, you're not making the bread disgusting there. You're not making the bread a bizayin in the sense that it's not being treated appropriately. in a manner that is related to uh, food handling. It's a relation to a mitzvah. The mitzvah of kedimus between yayin and pas. But over here we're talking about using food in a manner that might make it either be seen as disgusting or to be seen as not treating food in an appropriate fashion, which probably is a similar coin, but not exactly the same. If you look at Rashi over here, the Rashi says, "Ein ma'avir kos mole ala pas." You don't put a full cup of wine over bread, shelo yishbach ala pas, because it might spill on the bread. V'tei pas bezuya. The pas is going to be buzzy. It's going to be, sort of, it'll be zoyin. Whereas look at Rabbeinu Yaina, if you go back there again on Laman Zayin and Beis there in Daf Yerif, he says, "Ein manichin basar chayil pas." You don't put raw meat on bread. Time of the milsa mishum demamayas. Why not? Because it's miyas. And then he says, "Ein mavirin small ala pas." You don't put full cup of wine on pas. Why? Yishem yishbech miyayin ala pas, because maybe the wine's going to spill v'avimiyas. Right. You don't put the soup on top of the pas. Why? Gambazed. Hatam mi'isus. Right? And he says again and again and again, it's me, it's me, it's me. Sounds like that's his focus is mias rather than bizayin. I think there's a bit of a difference between the two. Mias is, in other words, it's possible that something won't be mias, but it could still be a bizayin. Right? Let's say if you happen to think the taste of bread infused with wine is really delicious, right? Or soup. I think today there's certain soups we talked about. It's like onion soup. Sometimes they serve it with bread. It's not disgusting, right? That's how people like it. So it's not necessarily always disgusting, but it could be a bizayin if it's done in a certain manner, right? So I think there is a bit of a daylight between Rashi focusing on bizayin and the Rabbaniana focusing on miyas. But nevertheless, that's one of the halachas. Yeah. So not throwing bread is clearly not a situation where it's going to be miyas. It could be, but it's not. It's not 100%, right? Because as long as you throw bread and you're not such an expert catcher, so the bread drops, and it drops, then it's going to be miyas, right? And the throwing itself, if you were an expert receiver, so then maybe yes, it would only be a question of bizayin, right? But if you're not such an expert catcher and it would fall, catcher in the rye. That's good. If anybody read J.D. Salinger, which I haven't to mention this past Shabbos thing. Okay, we say it separately. If you're not an expert, so then it falls down by definition. You have mias and bizayin. So it's not clear to me when the Gemara is saying that you're not supposed to be zarek, that it's one way or the other. I'm just saying, I think you can see a bit of a daylight between Rashi and Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay. In any event, Rashi certainly agrees that there's a concept of mias because the Gemara is going to bring it up in a second. But until now, we didn't discuss mias. So that's why I'm making the argument that maybe over here, even though Rabbeinu Yonah says it's mias, Rashi uses the word bizay. Maybe there's specific, maybe the bizayin eichlon is what Rashi's focusing on at this stage. Okay, so again, so the Gemara says that there are four things that you can't do with bread. Amemar Marzutra for Rav Ashi Kricha Rifta Badi Adadi. So Amemar Marzutra and Rav Ashi were eating bread together. You remember we already had them in Dalam and Beis, right? Where Amemar Marzutra and Rav Ashi were sitting together. We find them many times in Shas. Amemar Marzutra and Rav Ashi sitting together. Remember we had a Gemara when we did Agunis, right? So 2 years ago now we did a Gemara in Ksubas Sam Gimel, where over there also was Amemar Marzutra Rav Ashi. We're all sitting together. And I think it's the order of the hierarchy. That's how they sit together. So Meimar, then Marzutra, then Rav Ashi. So they're eating together. So I said the Kamayu Tamrin, right? And they brought in front of them some dates and pomegranates. I'm not 100% clear what the reason for telling us that they brought dates and pomegranates are, but in any event, Shaka Marzutra sounds like Marzutra took some. Maybe he took the dates and pomegranates. I'm not sure what he took, but he took something. Pasak l'kamet Rav Ashi distana. So then he threw. So Marzutra took maybe the time of money. I'm not sure. Whatever it was that he took. Pasak l'kamet Rav Ashi distana. Then it sounds like Rashi says he threw the Distana, which if you read it, it sounds like Rashi's saying, what's Distana? Administration, right? Rashi says, Manasha Basar Mavushal, some sort of cooked meat, meaning he took some food, not the tamarim or the reminder, he took some cooked meat and he threw it to Ravashi. So Ravashi is stunned. Says the Gemara, Ravashi asks, Marzuchi, you threw me some meat? Don't you hold that you're not supposed to throw food? Now, you notice this is the difference than what we said in the quote from Sechus Derech, right? There we said, Ein Zarkin, it's a pass. Here we're saying meat. So he asks him, how could you throw the meat? So what does he answer him? So Marzuchi responds, Hahi pass Tanya. Yeah, we just said that you're not allowed to throw bread. Well, we're not talking about bread here. It was about meat. So I threw the meat. So says the Gemara about Tanya, but don't we have a price that says Shem Shein Zarkin, it's a pas kach and Zarkin Tzaychlim? Don't we have a price that says that the same way you're not supposed to throw bread, you shouldn't throw food in general? Amarle. So this is the response now of Ravashi to Marzutra. So Marzutra says, no. Amarle, about Tanya, you have another price. Afal Pish Shein Zarkin, it's a pas. Aval Zarkin, Tzaychlim. Even though we said that you can't throw bread, but you are allowed to throw food. So everybody's got a price going for them. Some guy says, not allowed to throw food aside from bread. Another price says you're allowed to throw food aside from bread. But everybody agrees you can't throw bread. So says the Gemara. So what are you going to do with all these contradictory prices? Like cash. The way to answer up these prices is not contradicting, obviously. So what do you say? Depends on if the thing is going to be disgusting, if it's thrown or not. That is to say, if it's going to be disgusting, then you can't throw it. If it's not going to be disgusting, then you would be able to throw it. But with regards to bread, even if the bread wouldn't be disgusting, still can't throw it. Something specific, an Indian about bread. This is potentially a reason why Rashi focuses on bizayin and not on miyas, right? Because there's something inherent in bread that we want to keep it in a place differently than we treat other food. Okay. Now, there's a big test that we didn't, it's on the Gemara from yesterday, Kaman Azad Amar Shmuel. But I didn't find test to be all that clear. I think Rabbeinu Yonah says it a little bit clearer. So that's why I want to focus on Rabbeinu Yonah. So Rabbeinu Yonah says like this. So now, remember, before we go to Rabbeinu Yonah, just remind ourselves, we had a Gemara that said, that Shmuel says, Isa call Adam, Isa Adam called Tzarachav Pas. Person able to do whatever he wants with bread. Whatever you want with bread. The Gemara says, who's that going like? The Gemara says, that's going to Rabbi Lezer. Lezer says that if you have raw wine, even though it's not drinkable, you're able to use it for the Tiyas Yadayim. And the Gemara says that Shmuel says you can do whatever you want with bread. Who's that going on? That's going to Rabbi Lezer. That's really the halacha? That's really what we're saying? That Shmuel finds that it's permitted to use bread in any manner? That's really the fundamental question that we have. Rabbi Lezer ben Horkin, right? It's a Mishnah. It's 100 years, whatever, before Shmuel. Shmuel is an Amayra who saw the end of the Tanakh. He saw Rebbe, right? Rebbe saw Meir. Meir saw Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva saw Rabbi Lezer ben Horkin. He says Rebbe. About 100 years later. And Shmuel is saying that you can treat bread any way you want. That's the opinion of Lezer. That's really the halacha. More is not comfortable with this halacha. But it's not just that. We have a Gemara, and the Gemara tells us that another line from Shmuel, that the Gemara says, that Shmuel says that Shmuel says not in fact exactly like that. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos, and it'll be easy to remember. Because the Gemara that we have here is not on base. And the Gemara there in Shabbos, but that time is also not on base. So in that, I'm not reading deep into the printers, but I'm just saying it's a very cute coincidence that we have another Gemara there in Shabbos, not on base. What the Gemara tells us about Shmuel's position on what you do with bread. And over there in that Gemara in Shabbos, Shmuel is limited. Shmuel says that you're able to do kol midi, aisatzrach of the path, she'ein and mois. You're able to do whatever you want with bread, so long as it's not mias. So there he qualifies it. Doesn't you do whatever you want with bread. He acknowledges the possibility of mias and says it's not okay then. So that's what I wanted to focus on now for a minute. Just to do Rabbeinu Yonah over here. So Rabbeinu Yonah says like this. The Gemara Amri beheaded Shmuel Sofker Belezev. Amr Daisa on Kol Tzarach of the Pas. Va'af al pi Shebelezev who Yacha Eitzel Rabbim Shebreis and it's a verse Kamaitzer Belezev is fighting against the Rabbanon. And we don't pass like a Yacha. I feel lucky. Came much under Ryan HaAmera. Shesever Kamaitzer and Ifsek Allah Kamaitzer. But Allah has to be like a Belezer because 100 years later you have Shmuel passing like a Belezer. So the halacha presume is like a Belezer. But if that's the case, then you should be able to put your soup on the bread. Miu Dafki says, but maybe he says, Shmuel only says in that situation about soup and putting it on the bread. Maybe only over there it's mutter. But this about putting raw meat on bread to soak up the juice that's coming out of the raw meat into the bread, or if you're in kais alapas, and then you shouldn't pass a full kais of wine over bread because it's going to drip and get into the bread, make it disgusting. Even Shmuel agrees that you're not allowed to do that, even though Shmuel said, Adam called tzarach of the bread. Says, no, that's not what it means. You can't do anything you want with bread. You could put soup on top of the bread. In that situation, yes. But raw meat, full cup of wine, no. That's going to make the bread disgusting, and Shmuel doesn't agree that you could do that. Why? Says the Rabbeinu Yonah. Shmuel doesn't think that the bread gets disgusting when the soup gets in the bread. Like we've mentioned before, people serve the onion soup or certain soups with bread, with like a big crouton or something. Like people like it, so it's not mice. Hold on. So it's not mice. When the yain falls in, that's really disgusting. And only in this are we saying that the halacha is like Shmuel, the Amar Tzarach of the pass. She'enema is kol kach. Aval b'shar by the Shmuel the Aser, but in everything else Shmuel would agree that it's Aser the Shamin le behedya. And we heard this from Shmuel directly because the Gemara says in Shabbos, no, base that what called midei demam is Aser. That anything that's disgusting is Aser. So that's to say, even though over here it sounds like Shmuel saying Isa Adam called Tzaracha b'pas that he would be disagreeing with this Hilchos Derech Eretz and hold that you can do whatever you want with bread. It's not true, because in Shabbos on Nun Beis we say that Shmuel is going to say that you could do things that you want that are not disgusting, but he's limited by disgusting. He's limited by mias. So if he's limited by mias, then he agrees with this effective Maseches Derech Eretz that says you can't do certain things with bread. You can't throw it. You can't put a full cup of wine, passing it over it. You can't put raw meat on it. The only thing that then it comes out that Shmuel, the Rabbeinu Yonah wants to say, the only thing that it comes out that Shmuel would agree is on putting soup, soup next to bread, so the soup might, drip onto the bread. That's okay because that's not really disgusting. We're not discussing so much as the exact words of Rabbeinu Yonah. Or to the contrary, some people actually like it like that. They dip the bread in. Some people dip the bread in the soup. Okay. Now, where we are right now is a continuation of this Gemara. So that's basically the concept, the conceptual idea of not being mivaza eichlin, and being concerned for making the food into being miyas. So now we have again another machlokes here. It seems between Rashi and Rabbeinu. I know Tana Rabbanim mamshichen yayin b'tzinoros lefnei chasam lefnei kala. They used to put wine in pipes, straws, not like our day straws, but whatever, some sort of a pipe. They would bring wine before the chassan and kala. I just have to say this is cute. Um, right? You notice the lashon lifnei chassan v'lifnei kala. You notice that? Why does it say lifnei chassan v'kala? So when we say in the halukas, right? What do we say? No. Bachurim v'gam b'sulais zekenim imna arim. So the Nesina Lager of Nathan Adler, not Nathan Adler, Chassam Sefer, but Nathan Adler, chief rabbi of London, of the UK. So he wrote a book on the Targum Uncles called Nesina Lager. He made a drasha. He made a drasha on that. Well, we say in the Halukas, Bachum v'gam b'suz gedim narm. Why don't we say, why do you have the v'gam? So he said that the reason is because of the fact that it's not together. It's not together, it's separate. So I'm wondering if that's why over here also. Right? We say, Mamshichin, Yaim Sinos Lifnei Chasan, Vilifnei Kala. It's a separate lifnei. They had a straw pipe for the chasan and a pipe for the kala. They didn't have one pipe for both. They weren't having the man and the woman all together in one place. Rather, it was sort of a separate, more of a separate thing. Or maybe I'm dashing too much, but the extra lifnei here caught my eye. Okay, so why do they do this? Why do they put wine by the chasan kala? So Rashi says, look at Rashi Mamshichin. Rashi says Mishum Siman Taiv, because it's not Siman Taiv the song, Siman Taiv, right? Why do we say you're asking more Shabbos, Kavchav, Simanim for the Jews? Jews are outside of Mazel, fine, whatever. I'm not into this right now. Well, Rashi says the reason that the people did it is because it's a Siman Taiv to have overflowing wine by an occasion. Says Rabbeinu Yaina. Mamshichin Yam Sinas Nechas Mekabel Nechish Bezem Shum Bita. We're not worried about Biza Echlon. The Biza Kedem Mutter Mishum Simchas Chas Mekala. Right? Simchas Chas Mekala is not a new thing that you see in the wedding invitations. It was around then. What is Simchas Chas Mekala? What is it? They somehow made the Chas Mekala happy, excited to see the wine pouring out of the vat. I don't know exactly, but not because it's Simon, right? But because it's part of Simchas Chas Mekala. So again, is it a major machlokes? No, but it is a different reason what is being driven by. But here we get to one that maybe you saw or maybe you didn't see in your lifetime, which is v'zarkin lifneim kloyas ve'agoizim b'moisachama, and they would throw in front of the chasan kala kloyas ve'agoizim, right? Nuts and these kind of baked things. During the sunny days, during the summer months when it wasn't disgusting. Right. You may know or may not know that in non-Jewish movies they have such a thing where the chas and kala come out of the wedding hall, they throw rice on them. Right. Why are they doing it? Because they think it's a siman type. This is the same idea. For Rashi, it's the same idea. Again, according to Benyan, it's because of simchas chas and kala, but here, these people thought it was a siman type to do so. Why? I'm not 100% sure on it. But they only did it during the summer months. They didn't do it in the winter months. Avaloigas kloyas, but they didn't throw cakes. Says Rashi, why not? And if you threw a cake even in the summer months when the streets are dry, it would still become disgusting. So they didn't do that during the summer months. Only during. So they never threw things that could become disgusting any time of the year, but things that were, hard, like a nut or rice or whatever, things like this. They would do that, but only do that in the summer months when it wouldn't become disgusting. In the winter months, then it will be a different story because then it will become disgusting. Rabbeinu Yoina says over here as well that when did they do this? Alachat and alakala. When they do this, he adds, and they do it also bizarre chitim asayrim. Taisvis also mentions that the bottom Taisvis v'lemas agasham. The last line of Taisvis says, "Umiyu achshav shedarkan lizrei chitim beis chasanim." So Taisvis says that it's the custom to throw chitim in the in the beis chasan, in the custom fish. They throw wheat kernels. But you shouldn't throw it in places that are not clean. Because again, that would be a question of Bizayin making things mias, etc. like that. If you look at Rabbeinu Yaina says a little differently. He says, Mikat ner mineg sha'osim b'har mekayim, is they have a mineg in many places. Lizer chitim ma'isayim, they throw here wheat or barley, ala chasan, ala kala. So it's not just on the chasan, based chasan, it's on the chasan or the kala. When they're bringing them to the chuppah, not from the chuppah like in the movies, to the chuppah, they throw on them. No, do they throw them in the way? I have no idea. But whatever. I thought it's when they leave, maybe when they come, whichever one. So here he says that they throw both the chas and chal and they're going to the chuppah. It's funny, like they were very busy when they would go to the chuppah, because you also have the Taisvis in Sukkah on Mem Daled. Taisvis says that when they would go take the chas to the chuppah, and the bachim would be midakim b'charbeim, they would be stabbing each other with swords, because they would be fighting. I guess who gets close to the chassan, and the on the way to the chuppah, and they were throwing rice, and they're very busy. Okay, yeah. So Rabbeinu Yana says, "Sheinach going to do that in the summer months, or if it's in the winter months, it's man yiveshes hamayim alosh, but it has to be very dry." Right, that's Bizman Yivoshes Samayim Alav. That's a pasuk Marshnech. Shem Yirtza Yochel Lulka Kaisam Acharkach. Very interesting line. It says, because if you would want to clean it up, you would be able to. Don't you have to? Doesn't seem to say that you have to. Aval Yisha Aretz Lacha. But if the land is wet, the Yesh Lacha should be Zayachim. Then it's really disgusting. So interesting here that he says Bizi Eichel. The whole time he's been saying Mias, but clearly. It's not mias because no one's eating a wheat kernel or barley. So then it's just only bizer. I guess you have the option at that point. And then he says, "Avak sharetz lacha yesh lacha lebizer eichel k'da chasina chashash bezugas achidim aklim ma'gazim ve'in zarkin lecha ticha shabas of legi karshal pas." Not able to throw meat or bread. Bafil b'zachama asim ne bizer eichel. That's just bizer eichel to do that. Okay. It's interesting because Rashi had said that the reason you can't throw the gluskoyas was because nimasan. Because Rashi over there uses mias, and the Ben Yana here uses what? Bizu Eichland. So it's hard for me to process exactly why in the beginning. Rena focused mias. Now he says bizu. Rashi focused on bizu. Now he says mias. I'm not 100% clear. Okay. Continues the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, so Rabbi Yehuda is a shock pit. Something happened to us. They forgot to make a bracha and they were eating. And then they remembered. So what should you do? So Masalkan on side echad. Rabbi Yehuda says, move it to one side of your mouth, and then make a bracha. Tani Yidach, another bryce. So now we have three bryces on this point. Tani Yidach, we have one bryce that says, Tani Chada. We have one bryce that says, boiling. Swallow what you have, and that's it. The Tani Yidach, Polton. And the other bryce says, take it out of your mouth. The Tani Yidach, Misalkan. The other one says, put it to the side of your mouth. Three bryces all seem to contradict each other. Like Kash says the Gemara, hard to Tanya boil on this, that we say that you should swallow the mashkin because you don't have any other option. If you're going to spit it out, it's disgusting. You won't be able to drink it again. If you put it to the side of your mouth, like if you have your mouth full, right? You take a drink, put it to the side, bracha doesn't work. You can't make a bracha that way. So you just swallow it. That's the only option. But if Tanya Polton says, just spit it out, take it out of your mouth, that's what we did like mamas. That's something that's not going to be disgusting, right? If the food is still going to be okay, it's like if you're taking a piece of meat and chew the meat, take it out. It's disgusting, okay. But if you're taking I don't know, a candy, right? You make a bracha on it. So take a candy out of your mouth and make a bracha. put the candy back. Maybe not all candies, but a hard candy, sucking candy, something like that. So if you take it out of your mouth, not a problem. The tiny misakam, the media the mamas. And this that says you push the side of your mouth, because if you take it out of your mouth, it'll be really disgusting. So there, in that sense, you can put it in the side of your mouth and then you make a bracha. Now we're on the top of Nun Aleph. So b'midi deloy mamas, says the Gemara. B'midi deloy mamas, on something, a situation when it's not disgusting, right? In a situation when it's not going to be gross when you take it out of your mouth. So says the Gemara, not looks like you're on. So, but also, what's the problem? Just put it inside of your mouth, deliberate, and make a bracha on it. In other words, why do you have to take it out of your mouth, the candy? It doesn't take up so much space. Put it inside of your mouth. You have enough real estate in there, and make the bracha. Says the Gemara, no, we can't do that. And here we get an exciting thing. You see one every day. This is the mentioned Rabbi Yitzchak Kaskesa, right? It sounds like Kaskesis, like scales, but that wasn't his name. It's with a sin, not a samach, not a sin. This is only mentioned in Shas. This is it. So he comes to explain why it is. This is his chus in Shas. Why it is, right? Everybody in Shas, I remember who says everyone in Shas was mentioned, had Ruch HaKodesh. That's the level. I mean, any rabbi is not Rishon. The level that he's coming to respond to, what he's coming to explain, is why is it when you have food, which, even if it's not mias, and you can take it out of your mouth, why can't you just put it on the side and make a bracha? Why not? What's the problem? What's missing? This felt epis that it's better to make a bracha with a mouth that has no food in it. Explains Rabbi Yitzchak Kaskasa, Kamed Rabbi Yitzchak Barav Mishmed Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Shenem. I quote Rabbi Yochanan because the pasuk tells us, "Yimali pi tilosecha." Let my mouth be full of praise to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And when you have something in your mouth, it's not full, not a full praise. Therefore, it's better to take it out of your mouth. Says the more Baitman and Rav Chizda. They asked Rav Chizda a question. Now we have a very exciting sugi right here. So they asked Rav Chizda a question. Somebody who ate and he drank and he didn't make a bracha. Right? Rashi says he didn't make a mitzi, he didn't make a burial, like a geffen, whatever. He didn't. He forgot. So So what should he do now? Now they finished eating. Should he now make a bracha again? So Amalu Rav Chizda said, Misha Achol Shum. Somebody who adds garlic. If any stinks, die Evans. Should he now eat more garlic so he should stink more? Of course, he already know he stinks. We don't need him to be eating more garlic, so he should be able to be more smelly. In other words, what's his point? The point is, I'm Ravina Hilkach. Afilu Gomer Sudasa Yasav Yibar. So do you need more garlic to make your mouth smell? No, you ready smell plenty. So Ravina says, Rav Chizda is trying to say, Rav Chizda didn't explain what he said. Ravina Darshni, Rav Chizda meant that Hilkach Afil Gomer Sudasi Yasav Yivarach. Therefore, Rav Chizda was trying to tell you that even if you finished your meal, you can go back and make a bracha now. You can make a mitzi now. You can make a geffen now. What do you mean? Because you already stink. In other words, you already ate. So, okay, normally you make the bracha before you eat. In this case, you'll make it after you eat. Not such a big deal. Says the more really? So Ravina has a proof. Ravina has a proof to this point. The Tanya Ravina says, when somebody makes a tefillah, so he gets up after the tefillah, and he makes a bracha al tefillah. Says the Gemara, it's not a proof. Ravina, you're wrong. There's a difference between tefillah and everything else. What's the difference? There's a Gemara, big Gemara in Pesachim Zion. The difference is whether or not you're a person was chayzer to make a bracha or not. On most things we say, you make a bracha, you make a bracha before you do it. There's an exception. What's the exception by tefillah? Why? Because by tefillah, you're not a gavra chazah. You're a tummy. So therefore, after you're tefillah, you can make the bracha, but you can't make the bracha beforehand. Rashi says that what we're talking about is a situation of tefillah for Baal Keri. You're not allowed to make a bracha on your Baal Keri. Tais says, what are you talking about? Of course you're allowed to make a bracha on Baal Keri. You already went through the whole sugi back and forth. You are able to make brachas even if you're Baal Keri. So Tais says, we're talking about is the tefillah geirim. When somebody's a ger, when does he make the bracha? By his tefillah. He makes the bracha by his tefillah after he's tefillah. So this is the exception. But the exception is not where The exception is not where? Beforehand. The exception is after, only by tefillah, but everywhere else you make the bracha before. And if you didn't, you lost it. In this case, he didn't have a reason why he shouldn't make the bracha before. He should make the bracha before. He didn't. He lost it. I have to stop over here.